Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political and economic and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on education in our country is the always brilliant Honorable Judge Vincent Pirrone. And now, Mr. Davis and Judge Pirrone.
Welcome back. Good to be with you again every Wednesday at 6:30. I look forward to it. I have the most brilliant audience. They make me smarter and they educate me. I do the best I can to get out of the way, and you guys are great. I really appreciate the comments that I get and the insights that I get from you, so keep it up. Thank you. And I'm very pleased to have a good friend and a super guy, Vinny Pirrone. He was a judge in Long Beach, Long Island, and he ran for the post of the Long Island supervisor against, I think, Al D'Amato some years ago. And Al D'Amato just beat him out. But that was his good luck. He didn't have to serve as a politician and do all the things that they do that make us less proud of them. I think politicians today are less popular than have a lower rating with society than even used car salesmen. So we have an interesting subject today that affects almost everybody in our society. If it doesn't affect the older people as much, it affects their children, their grandchildren, and the future of American society. So let's start off by thinking about the status of our educational system. Unfortunately, in terms of our status in the world, we are way, way below any of the advanced nations of the world, and it's embarrassing to see how poorly we do in competitive ratings. So we got to figure out is it the school system? Is it the fact that parents don't contribute enough or try to contribute too much? So let's go on and review these different issues. I'm always excited to quote Roger Schenck, who was a leader in the development of educational wisdom and teaching, and was very cynical and depressed by the nature of America's preparing our students for the world that they're going to live in and for the future world. Roger Schenck was quoted as saying, the only thing wrong with our education system is what we teach and how we teach it. That's the only thing wrong. What we teach and how we teach it. So let's get on into it. And Vinny, do you have any opening remarks that you want to say about this subject?
Oh, Morty, thank you for the opportunity to be here and discuss with you. It's always a pleasure, first of all, to talking with you on any subject is a pleasure, but you seem to hit, and on these podcasts, very relevant issues, and I'm amazed that you find them each and every week. I'm privileged to be here. I'm privileged to be your friend, and I think that the subject that you picked today is very relevant, certainly today. And I'm interested in hearing your views, and I'd certainly be happy to share mine with you.
The question, let me pose some of the questions we have that we want to get answers to, solutions, or at least figure out what adjustments we should make. How do we make sure that middle class and working class Americans have the skills needed to compete in the 21st century labor market, and for the Americans to earn a decent living wage, get jobs that provide for them a decent living wage, and not depend on handouts or the resentment of some of the people that are wealthy, very wealthy, and feel that they're wrongly treated because they have to pay big taxes for people that they claim refuse to work, and so how do we adjust our educational system to prepare better for the weaknesses?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I thought I lost you. Okay, well, I'm sorry, Morty. I didn't think you were finished with what you were proposing. Well, my views are that I think our educational system is failing. We cannot substitute grants, taking subjects that were in the ordinary course of a subject a year, and take them out because they're difficult. We see this, what's happening in schools. First of all, I think one of the biggest dangers is the fact that they are removing some of the subjects that were regents and some of the regent requirements to get a high school education. And I guess I can understand that they want to bring education and graduation rates up, but that's not way to do it. No way to do it. The Americans, as all human beings in every country, have the ability to succeed, and they will succeed given a proper education. And many of them do, if they're privileged to go to these schools of higher learning, like you yourself, as a Harvard graduate. However, you can't substitute and take away subjects and attempt to increase the graduation rate without the qualifications that have always been there and necessary. It started with progressive education. That was the first, I think, problem. I think that we've lowered our educational standards, and in doing that, we've lowered the ability of the Americans in those schools in which the standards are not what they should be to succeed. And that's going to be a problem in the future, and a continuing problem unless it's addressed.
Shouldn't a good education give all American citizens, all Americans, the resources and skills to achieve a fair or rewarding income for the work they produce, and happiness, instead of the what today so many Americans that graduate school lead dreary lack of fulfillment and lifelong dependence, and dispiriting government safety net handouts. Why don't we? Why?
Well, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Education should be available to every American, as it should be, in my opinion, to every human being, never mind only American. However, you can't substitute grades that aren't earned. You can't lower the standards of education to bring those people who are not able to progress under the system. That's not going to help. It's going to create more dependence. It's going to create more people subject to receiving funds that are resisted by those who've educated and who've succeeded under the system. You cannot substitute quality. Morty, you yourself, you're a Harvard graduate. At the time you graduated Harvard, were there grants given to minorities because they were minorities? Were there admissions by minorities or those who could not make the grade for whatever social or progressive reason? It didn't exist. And we produced probably the greatest generation. But what's happening now? We're rewarding those who have not met the standards. And unfortunately, that's lowered the educational level in this country, and we're far behind. This doesn't happen in China, it doesn't happen in Russia, and it doesn't happen in Vietnam or those countries which we are now facing as threatening our way of life. And I think that's a problem, and it's going to continue unless we change.
Yeah, incidentally, I think it's unfair to say we don't make education available to all of our people, all Americans. We generally do, and our politicians insist that we do. It's just the quality of what we teach and the nature of the people that go into teaching. I have to tell you, when I was young, and when you were young too, we were living in the height of the Depression. And one of the best jobs in the world, the best job in the United States, was teaching. Because you got 10 weeks off in the summer. If you were a teacher, you got great hours. You worked great hours. You were looked up to, and you were fully employed. Where there was 25% unemployment, good teachers were kept and had tenure. So it was the best job in the world. So as a consequence, I and you were very lucky to be tutored coached by the very best people available. When I went to Brooklyn College, and it had an education department that was one of the biggest in the United States, a lot of my classmates, the ones that were really bright, all said, I'm going to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. And the ones that were doing terrible said, well, I could always go into teaching. That's a terrible, terrible thing that we're turning over our best future, our young people, to people who are going into teaching, not because they love it or they feel it's an important thing to do to upscale society, to do selfless sacrifice, to take time to visit with students, to care, to love what they do. And so today we're turning them over to the worst of the worst in terms of, and they're not well compensated. In my view, they should be the highest paid because we're turning over our greatest asset to them. Also,
you hit a very tender spot with me, because as you know, I have a daughter, and my daughter, in addition to being a CPA, a lawyer, is a tenured college professor and teaches tax law at a university, a major university. And she does it because she actually loves teaching, and she loves sharing the knowledge and helping young people advance to be where they should be or could be in this great country of America. So I know what you're saying, and but I also have to say, even though my daughter is in the teaching profession, there are those teachers who today are concerned mostly and with the teachers' unions in advancement, and I think they've let go a little bit, especially on a lower level with this progressive education. I think that, first of all, years ago, and even now, we've had a great, this movement of not taking advancement tests in the lower grades in grade school. I mean, this was celebrated as something wonderful because parents kept their children from taking these standard tests, which would determine how they are advancing. This was the biggest setback that we ever could have shared, and it's celebrated. And the person who was the head of this was celebrated as some martyr or some wonderful savior. It's not true. We can't lower the standard and expect to get the same results as we had in the past. If we lower the standards, we're going to lower the level of education, and we're going to lower the level of where people are advancing. So I think this is the problem with education today. We cannot lower the standard to try to incorporate everyone, those who were immigrants, those who are minorities, those in the black community, the Hispanic community. We cannot lower the standards for them to advance. They won't. And it's doing them a disservice. We should keep our standards where they were when you and I were being educated. And I think that's what we should do, and that's what we should have done. And that's what, unless we do that, we're going to have a serious problem as we do now in education.
Vinny, as you described, you had one daughter that unfortunately, I wish you had 10 because she's so special and she contributes so much to society. But it's not accidental, and you and your wife, who was great, your wife was really great. She was treasurer of Long Beach, and a great woman and a great wife to you, and a great mother. So it's not an accident that your daughter turned out so well, and now your grandchildren are turning out to be good students and great Americans and great people that we're all proud of. So, but it's not accidental. You know, there's an old saying, education begins at home, and that means that from the minute you're born, you're starting to be educated. And parents that care and that take that view and start to teach their kids early on. I have grandchildren that learned to read at 2, at 3, and did puzzles and so forth, because one of my daughters was so dedicated. She had allergies and she was always at home, and she used that time not to be on the phone or do things that made her personally happy, although teaching her kids made her happy. And so she invested that energy, and it's not accidental that her kids today, every one of them is an A+ student, A+. So, you know, we have the problem that a lot of minorities, particularly the African American community, says it's racism that causes their inability to rise or to do as well salary-wise, or to progress in their careers to the same high level. But that's nonsense, because now we know that the ones that were brought up well, like Obama and like Colin Powell, and it goes on and on. We've had a president that was African American. We now have a vice president that's African American. We have 2 Supreme Court judges.
We have a mayor of New York City. We have police commissioners. We have police commissioners. That's Suffolk County. It goes on and on and on.
Yeah, the district.
But the question is,
the district attorney.
Are we rewarding
the district attorney
because of their color? Are we attempting to change the situation as it existed and rewarding without merit those people of color? I think that's happening, and I think that's a disaster. When I hear that they have to have so many people on a board of directors, or they have to have so many people in a corporation, that is not what I call advancement. That's not helping the minorities. That's not helping the country, and that's not helping civilization. It's not going to change overnight. As you said, it's earned. And unfortunately, those who did not have the family and upcoming, there's a way, there's a future. There's not, and that's not an end all. But we've got to understand, and we cannot allow and we cannot progress and we cannot reward those who do not add and suffer and experience. And when I say suffer, I mean that the education, the study, the devotion and dedication. You can't reward someone for those things who've not witnessed and experienced those things. It'll never work. Never. That's my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, I'm amazed because you're a sort of a very conservative in your political views, and yet I find we're agreeing on almost everything up to now. You know, and the thread that I was trying to make or pursue, that I was pursuing was, you know, in the past, a lot of, even one of the great Harvard educators and psychologists was attributing the failure of the African Americans to their inferiority. More than one leading educator and leading politician and leading businessman.
And sports figures, Jimmy the Greek, a famous example.
Yeah. And today we say that that's not true, because the ones that go on to study and perform in school, it's meritocracy. You know, they reach the same top, but then they can't reach the same top as any white guy, any Asian guy. It's amazing, and it shows you that it's really cultural, because and lifestyle and values that parents have that makes the difference, because Chinese are newly arrived here, Asians newly arrived here, don't speak a word of English when they arrive, or some very little English, and African Americans are here 200 years, and they just don't do as well in school. At school, not all of them, but it's because their parents, you know, some of the leaders, some of the wise men in the past. Unfortunately, one of the best ones ever that articulated this was what was that actor who black actor who got into serious trouble with sexually. He had his own show. Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was preaching, if the African American mothers and fathers would stay together. Incidentally, it's gone up with, I think, 30 years ago, 30 or 40 years ago, 20% of African American households had a single parent unmarried. You know, today it's gone up to 70%, and you know the kids suffer the consequences because the father disappears, doesn't support them. The mother has to work, so she's not there to help them grow up. And the most important years in terms of education, it's the formative years. You know, 1 to 5. Formative, and you can't make it up the rest of your life. By the time so many of these African American kids get to first grade, they're already way behind the 8 ball. And
But do you help the situation by lowering the standard? That's my point.
No,
You're lowering the standard
no, look.
to accommodate. I'm not saying that the black people or the black individuals or even Hispanic Americans have not suffered the consequences in their home life and maybe in the way they've lived, which affected their ability to become educated. But you cannot change that by rewarding that and trying, and that's what we're doing. We're lowering the standards, less regions, allowing people to vote out of taking standard tests. We're not helping these individuals, we're hurting them further. And this system of putting people on boards of directors
in the ads, and look at television ads, and just putting people where there isn't actually the situation that warrants it to help bring up that level amongst those people. It's not working. It's creating further resentment, certainly on my part, as well as other individuals who've earned that right. And what we're doing, we're taking the earnings of those people, the hard-working people in America that made America great. And what we're doing, we're dissipating those funds and taxing to pay for those individuals who've not advanced and who don't intend to advance or who care to advance. And that's what's happening. America is becoming more and more progressive. And that word to me is a sign, it's a danger signal. My views and my are totally, and I'm sure I'm not alone, but I'm certainly not maybe part of the majority, but I certainly believe a lot of people feel the way I do. You cannot reward those that do not deserve to be rewarded. You cannot help those who do refuse to be helped. You cannot educate those who refuse to be educated. It's as simple as all of that. And once you try to change that formula, you're hurting this country. And education suffers as well as Americans.
Vinny, permit me to support statistically and social history-wise all that you just said, because and these are numbers that are available to everybody. When I was a kid, the three best schools in New York State were Stuyvesant High School, the best high schools. Stuyvesant High School, Bronx School of Science, and Brooklyn Tech. And the top students overwhelmingly, when I was a kid, were Jewish, because Jewish values are, from the time you're born, the most important thing, even more important than prayer, is learning, studying and learning. And it's indoctrinated from the time you're born and throughout your life even. And so today, the top students of those three schools, and there's a great rebellion on the part of the African Americans, because I'll tell you what some of the statistics are. They say it's unfair, it's unreasonable, it's biased, it's everything. The top students are all Asian, and that goes for Harvard too. Harvard says they're getting lawsuits from Chinese, very qualified, excellent students that are rejected because those positions at the school are given to African Americans or others based on affirmative action. And Stuyvesant High School, for example, I think they have 2,000 or 3,000 students. And in the last few years, the number of African Americans, I think 3-4 years ago, was about 20. The year after that was 18. I think this last year was as low as 7 or 8. And they're attributing it to, bias and they refuse to realize that all of these numbers come from meritocracy. Nobody in that community complains that the guys that make the most money in the United States doing their work are NBA basketball players and football players. And nobody ever made baseball players, and nobody ever made more money in one night than the number one boxer. What was his name? Mayweather. Mayweather made a couple of million in one night, a few million. So, and that's all based on meritocracy. They're not. And if you see a white ball player on the NBA on the team or two, it's like unique, and usually they're European. It's just amazing, and we accept that because
college basketball too.
Yeah, and we accept that because we know that it should be. You want to watch the best people, and so likewise you want to educate the people with the most potential so they can add to the productivity and the advancement of our society. I'll tell you one great example. You know, Colin Powell, who was head of the armed forces, the U.S. Armed Forces, and then it was Secretary of State, a really fabulous guy. Nobody ever said he's black or he's. They all said how outstanding he was. Everybody looked up to him, and he was saying, and he spoke Yiddish of all things, you know. And they said, "How the hell do you speak Yiddish? Even most Jews don't speak Yiddish." And he says he worked in a hardware store. He lived in the Bronx. He worked in a hardware store where had a Jewish boss, and all the customers spoke Jewish. They were newly arrived from European countries or wherever. And so he learned to speak Jewish very well. But also, he was a great worker, and his boss loved him. And when he graduated high school, he asked his boss, his Jewish boss, that he'd like to come back to work for him. And the Jewish boss said, "Colin, I'd love to have you back. You're a great worker. You're trustworthy. You're everything. You're the kind of guy I'd love to have working for me all my life and all your life." And he said, "But Colin, you should go on to school. You should go on to college. You will have a lot more potential than just being a part of a hardware store, working the register and dealing with sales to customers." And that made a big difference. He says it made a big difference because he didn't have a role model to tell him that. And so that's critical. So it wasn't only, what was his name again? Bill Cosby that said it. A number of other people said, we got to tell the mothers to stay home, to teach the kids, to be involved with their kids so they can be equal. You know, if they spent as much time studying as they do getting ready to try to be NBA basketball players, they're day and night they're in the parks. And I don't begrudge them that, and I think it's great that it's one route for tremendous advancements. Some of them have become billionaires. Michael Jordan's become a billionaire, and deservedly so, and good people. And what's his name today, who scored the most points ever in the history of the NBA, LeBron James. And they're all fabulous, and they're great entertainers, and I love watching them. And I don't want to have more white players just because they're white, and less black players just because they're black. So that's the way it should be in every state.
I'm sorry.
Pardon me. That's the way it should be in every segment of our society.
Yeah. Well, I think, Morty, this could be a subject of one of your programs, and certainly a relevant one, because there's a lot to be said about that, role models, et cetera, you know. And again, I think it's an important subject. I think it's a relevant subject. I think it's what's happening here in America today, and I think it should be addressed. And it's not being addressed to my that I have to be satisfied, but I think a great many people are resentful of what's going on.
Well, the country the country has to be satisfied. It's terrible that we're so low on the in the competition with other countries. You know, a country like Finland is top.
And we're going to continue to get lower unless we make certain changes.
Yeah.
It's not happening here. I think, again, Morty, I don't want to go into another subject, but what's going on in this country with the progressive, wing of the Democratic Party, I think that's creating a situation that's heading to the problem. But then again, I want to stick on education, and again, to talk about education, you talked about Colin Powell, and you talked about the example, and you talked about his working in a hardware store, and he didn't have the guidance at home. My mother and father, neither one of them graduated past, or I should say, advanced, past the 6th grade. Yet my father and my mother, who are the heroes of my life, and the people that I adore and venerate, they insisted that I become educated. So I had no one. I was the first college graduate. And I'm not saying, oh, I'm so important, oh, I'm so wonderful. Just the opposite. There's stories like yourself.
Don't put yourself down. Wait, don't put yourself down.
In one room.
Vinny, don't put yourself
What's that?
down. You are wonderful. You are special. You are terrific.
No, Morty, there's so many people like myself and yourself that struggle. You know, when I think of what you did, when I think of how you went from college to Harvard, when I think of how you, in one bedroom with 4 children, and how you've become what you've become, that didn't come from being given a silver spoon, whether you were Jewish, whether you were Irish, whether you were... That became because of your efforts. And that's the kind of efforts that people who advance display and exhibit. And that's not going to be replaced with doles and handouts. It's only going to make those people more. That's why we have so many people receiving assistance, so many grants. The government giving away money like crazy, but it's not helping in certain areas. Anyway,
it leads to a lot of resentment. They say that the makers.
Absolutely, and why should
they say there's an economics. In economics,
you know, I drove a truck all through my 5 years of high school. Last year, high school, and 4 years to pay for my college education. Do you think I like this program of forgiving and loans, of which I have for my grandchildren? No. You know, there has to be some equity. There has to be some balance of what's going on. You cannot take and you cannot reward those who do not want to help themselves. When you do that, all you're doing is throwing away money. And when you throw away money, that's decline, and certainly you have a lot of resentment, and that's why you have the division in government that we have today. And this country, the greatest country that ever was and ever will be, or is, I should say. I don't know where it's going to be, but it's a shame that we're suffering such a division, because I don't think it's ever been this way. Maybe before the Civil War, I wasn't around, the North and the South, but do you realize the government, the resentment between those who are in government and those who are not in government? And when you hear it's a division that shouldn't exist in one of the best and most democratic and, countries where so much is available to us, where everyone can advance if they want to, but not because they're giving something, because they do it on their own. And I think this is unfortunately what's happening in America today. And I regret it terribly. I regret it because I have grandchildren, I have a daughter, and I regret it for the future, for all of those, relatives or not.
I hate to agree with you all this much, but I haven't found anything to disagree with you on today, even though before we talked, before you agreed to join me today, you said, well, you're so right-wing and all we'll do is fight. And I can't disagree with almost anything that you said. I want to tell you, the economists talk about the makers and the takers. And the makers, even though they may not be taxed high enough and should be taxed higher, but they're resentful. They're resentful that there's people that they claim that aren't working. Unfortunately, in most cases, they'd probably like to work, but they've never been trained. One of the great things, one of the reasons I'm in favor of a draft is because they would take 18-year-old African Americans and others from poor communities that never had role models to see somebody get up and get dressed and leave on time and come back. And so a draft 2 years in the service, not necessarily to fight, but to get training. They could do other things. They could help at schools. They could do all kind of assistance in government, or they could be there to protect the country ultimately. But that resentment causes friction in society. And there was another thought I had on the score, but we got to find a way to overcome that, because we know now that we see now that it's not their inability to arrive at the top. You started to say the district attorney in Manhattan is black, African American. The attorney general of New York is a woman, a black woman.
The mayor, the police commissioner.
Yeah, and also the head of our Defense Department, the leading general, Austin is of all the troops.
Do you actually believe they are the most qualified for those positions? All of those that you mentioned.
Well, the ones that were elected. The people feel they were qualified. So
in the city of New York.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not going to take.
I don't know.
I don't know.
When I see the mayor and giving a speech, and I see all black people around him, and maybe one or two whites, I have to say that the pendulum has gone the other way, and I don't think that's what and I think there's resentment to that. No. I certainly resent it.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a balance.
Yeah, but
I don't think it's a balance in the representative numbers. We're a country based on representation of all people that should be represented in government. And I think that what's happened is, in an effort to try and change what's occurred over the years too quickly, is that we have created a society where people who are not competent are rewarded and placed in high places, and placed in high places in government, business, corporations, and otherwise. Yeah. I mean, don't you actually find, Morty, that there are people placed on the boards, corporations, that are there for their color and not for their qualifications?
Of course.
Do you believe that or not?
Of course, but let me say this: I don't want to malign specific politicians because they're black or African American or whatever, or Hispanic, because there are plenty of white politicians that are disasters and that are fakes. And
no question about it. I'm not talking about that. Those who are qualified, Morty, my faith, and I believe this, and I hope to be practicing my faith. I don't believe anyone is unequal. I don't believe there's a difference between a black, white, green, yellow, or any color person. I believe we're all God's creatures and entitled to an equality and entitled to all of the benefits that are existing in this country. But I don't believe in rewarding those who have not earned those benefits. I mean, to me, that's what I find is the problem in this country, the problem in New York State, and certainly the problem in New York City. I think that there are people who are in high places who don't deserve to be there. Not because they're qualified, but just the opposite. They're there because of their color. They're there because they're trying to create a situation that isn't a reality.
Vinny, you're so bright and so, as the word erudite, but we're getting closer to the end of the hour. I just want to bring up a few things, maybe next time or another time we can address them. The question is, some of the questions, how do we keep our schools safe? Should we lock the doors? Should we have metal detectors at the doors? Should we arm our teachers? It's a big problem today, and there's no reason why when you send your kids, especially little young kids, to school, that you have to worry about their safety. That was never, ever an issue. And the other thing I would ask is, what should the government's obligation be to educate its citizen? Is college a right or a privilege? There was a time when even elementary school was considered something that shouldn't be offered. It would be too expensive. And we managed to do that. And many leading countries where the happiness is greater, primarily the Scandinavian countries, and we're down on a happiness scale that's measured every year. The United States is down at around 16. The leading countries for happiness are Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, all countries that provide very good support, free college, many benefits that we don't have, universal health care. So we should look into that. I credit the Chinese because they say, they don't say, they've adopted all the, they look at what's great in America and they've adopted it. Even though they're called communists, they're the least communist country I know because they have as many or more billionaires as the United States. Karl Marx would turn over in his grave if he thought they were Marxists. But they look and see what countries do the best things. When we try to introduce things that might be better, as in the case with Roosevelt, when he introduced Social Security or unemployment insurance, they right away scream, these extremists on the right, well, that's socialism or communism. And that's not the way you get ahead. I would adopt whatever country does great. I would adopt their whatever makes them great. So that's another thing.
Well, Morty, okay, it's wonderful for you to say that, but the repression that China exists and howls over its citizens and residents is something that wipes out all of the good that you just talked about. I mean, I can't see how any acceptance of the communist China can be made by any, individual in this country, because they are repressive. They have a regime that's been and will continue to be repressive. Are they billionaires? Are they doing well economically? What good is that if there's no freedom? And to say that there's freedom in China is to be blind. And as far as to discuss the issue about safety of children in a school, it's not. It helps a little bit, but it's not going to put it out. These people who go in with a gun and shoot up and kill individuals, whether it's in a hospital, school, or otherwise, are obviously not sane. They're crazy. And there are crazy people, there are people who have mental problems, and there will continue to be people that have mental problems. It'd be wonderful if we could say psychiatry. You want to address the issue? Put the money there. Safety guard's not going to stop some lunatic with a gun killing more people.
Vinny, this is one issue on which I disagree with you 100%, because there's no other country in the world that has as many mass slaughters as we do, and mass assaults as we do. Do you know that this year an assault is considered a mass slaughter, a mass event, mass murder? But if there's 4 people that are killed or seriously wounded, and we've had over 180 this year already. It's more than a daily thing because we haven't had 180 days yet. There's about 1.5 events every single day. It happens so often that we don't even headline it anymore. It's only
happened today, Morty, in Texas.
Again?
Happened today.
Again?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
In a hospital, one person killed. I think it was Texas. No, it was one of the states. Yeah, today.
Oh, because I thought you were talking about the other day.
A shooter went in, killed one person, a hospital, and shot 4 other people. He's still at large as of the news of maybe 4 or 5 o'clock.
And other countries, Vinny, all other countries have as many crazy people as we do, but they don't. But they don't have access to guns. Well, we have over 400 million guns, more than one per person. And much more than one per person, because infants and young kids don't have it. But it's so ridiculous. A 6-year-old kid shot his teacher. This week, the last week in Texas, a guy was making noise, shooting his assault weapon, and the family shouted out for him to lower it because there's a baby sleeping. And he killed a mother and a daughter and a 9-year-old kid. 5 people he killed. They finally caught him yesterday. But it's outrageous.
But you know what? That's a whole new issue and a whole new subject.
Yeah, but we don't learn from others. Australia had one mass shooting in 1995. They took away everybody's guns. They said, if you want a gun, you got to go through a process. You got to learn how to put it away safely. You got to learn how to shoot, just like you do for a driver's test. And and then it takes a year. You get it under the police supervision. It takes a year to get it. They haven't had another mass shooting from 95 till about a year and a half ago. And in New Zealand,
well, Morty, Nassau County has some of the hottest, and I can tell you why I say that. I can tell you from experience. To get a pistol permit in Nassau County, even as a judge, I had to submit affidavits and I had to submit different papers and reasons explaining why to get a permit for a handgun.
Yeah, no, New York in general has tough, but you could get it in Connecticut, or you could get it in any and bring it across the border. We have too much, and I don't know why the Second Amendment is so holy, because
let me say this.
It's money. Money has become much more important than life. Money has become. Listen to this. Money has become much more important than life. The gun industry is a fortune, makes a fortune, and they fight like they're one issue. Other people have lots of issues they're concerned about. They're targeted. They won't let. Democrats can't even vote against gun control because they know if they vote for it, they're going to be primaried by the NRA. It's outrageous. It should not be. And even the Constitution, the way it's written, it doesn't say every man is entitled to have a gun. It's prefaced by saying a well-armed militia entitles every man to have a gun. So why did they preface it that? Why did they need extra words? They could have said every man in America is entitled to a gun. It's nonsense. It's ridiculous.
Well, I disagree with you. I don't think people should have automatic weapons, AR-15. I think they should be outlawed. And unfortunately, they were for a period of time, and then Congress changed the law. I don't think anyone should have an automatic weapon.
I agree with you there. For 10 years, for 10 years, we didn't allow automatic from 95 to 2005.
I do believe those.
And it was reduced.
Should be a law against them.
However,
I don't think that you should take away the right of a person to have a handgun. If they are.
I'm not saying take away
if they're officers, officers, or if they are indeed people that are not a threat to society. I think those guns should be removed if people have mental problems, or they should not be licensed if they have any problems or any difficulties with the law, mentality, or otherwise.
The access.
We should control the guns as they do in New York. I believe in that.
No, but also it should be that before you buy a gun, you should be scrutinized and determined that you're capable. And why can't we do at least as much as we do for a person that drives a car? You got to take a driver's test.
I've gone through the scrutinization as a judge.
Yeah, but right now you could go to a weekend show. They have them every day, as a matter of fact. Gun shows. You could buy 20 guns without even.
You're vetted. And you're like, you can't just walk in New York State anyway. I don't know about the other states.
No, at the gun shows, I'm not saying.
You can't walk into a gun show and buy a gun.
I'm not saying New York State.
You've got to be
in many states, in too many states, you can go to a gun show and buy as many guns as you want without being checked, without a background check, and then go out and sell them at a profit to anybody in the community, including criminals. Do you know there's only two industries that can be fined? It shows you how money's become more important than life. There's two industries that Congress has passed laws. You can't sue the gun industry if the manufacturer or the wholesaler or the retailer, the storekeeper that sells you a gun, and he sold it to a guy with got a record of murder and you can't sue them. That's the only industry you could sue. General Motors, if something, one of their cars killed somebody and they find a defective thing, or they sold it to somebody that shouldn't have been, had got access. So, and the other industry that can't be treated, with some common sense, is the pharmaceutical industry, because they have a law that the biggest purchaser of pharmaceuticals is the Medicare and Medicaid, and they can't negotiate lower prices. The Congress has dictated that. That's so ridiculous. It's so outrageous. And it shows that money, the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness has disappeared. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of greater profits, ever greater profits, with a complete disregard for human beings and the quality of life in this country.
Well, let's hope, Morty, the subject of the discussion today was education and how we could better it. Let's hope in the future that there is people more and we become more educated and we eliminate those guns that are not necessary. I'm not saying all guns, but certainly AR-15s and automatic rifles. And we do have a careful and inspection way of checking out individuals as they do in New York. Let's hope that happens. Let's hope we become educated to love and to replace love with hate, and to certainly respect the rights of others, and to respect our rights as individuals, and to all the things that this country, or that made this country what it is, the greatest country in the world.
Vinny, I'm sorry, but I'm not too optimistic, because if anything, it's moved in the other direction. Every time there's a slaughter, a killer of this nature, we rightfully have prayers, and the president might go visit, and the governor will come visit, but we don't do a single act that reduces that possibility. Not a single act. And it's hurtful, it's outrageous that people lose their young kids. How could we let that happen without taking some action? And as a matter of fact, it's moving in the opposite direction. A number of states now have passed free carry, universal carry. You could carry a gun without getting a license or anything. They've made the Second Amendment. They've made the Second Amendment so holy.
The subject of education,
What?
but I think that it's certainly a relevant issue, and maybe it should be the subject, and maybe has been, of one of these valuable podcasts that you bring to the people.
Okay, I'll buy you lunch and we'll have a discussion. I'm afraid, but
and incidentally, I can't wait till we have that final luncheon, my dear and close friend.
No final, no final. You should live till 120 and in good health, and at 120 we'll negotiate for more. But the reason I'm reluctant,
thank you for having me here.
The reason I'm reluctant to join you for lunch is if we get into this heated discussion about guns or anything else.
Well, we have lunch.
You'll punch me. You'll punch me in the mouth.
And the days of old.
You'll punch me in the mouth. Did you ever take up boxing at the YMCA or anything like that?
Did I ever take a what?
Did you ever take boxing at the, one of the guys?
When I was a boy, there was a loyal order of the Moose in Long Beach. When I was a boy, Morty, my father brought me there because my father was a great viewer of and a great fan of boxing. He loved Golden Gloves and he loved all of the fights. I mean, I became knowledgeable through him, and he took me to the Loyal Order of the Moose as a boy because they had a boxing program. I got the hell kicked out of me. I was such a disappointment.
I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to hear that your father had the smarts to take it to get the hell beat out of you. When I was young, I used to wear a yarmulke, a skull cap, back and forth from the Hebrew school I went to, and far too often I got beat up by. At that time, it was much worse than it is today. at least at that level, because at that time, before the Pope, one of the popes changed it, where before they said the Jews killed Christ and so forth, they changed all of the prayers away from that. But one guy, and I found out his name, and I found out he took boxing lessons at the YMCA, and one time he came over and started beating up on my younger brother, him and a couple of the other guys. And he says, "What are you going to do that?" I said, "You better cut that out. I'm going to punch you in the mouth or something." So he kept on doing it. I started to fight with him. He hit me till this day. My lower left gum is indented. And I found out that the reason that he was a good boxer, but he was having, what do you call it, those knuckles? What do you call that?
Brass knuckles.
Well, brass knuckles, yeah. He hit me with brass knuckles.
Oh, jeez.
The left side of my mouth, his name was Rocco. I bothered to find out Rocco. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I got the hell kicked out of me. My father put me in the boxing program, you know?
Yeah.
And he wanted so much for me to be a contender in Golden Gloves, but I let him down terribly. I got the hell kicked out of me.
Good.
But I learned to box.
He was a good father. God, thank God for that.
He was a great father.
You came
My
out,
hero.
whatever he did, you came out good, so he gets the credit. Okay, God bless you. Thank you for joining me. I'm sure everybody enjoyed having you on. You are great.
Well, Morty, it's
bless
always a privilege to be with you, whether it's on this podcast or whether it's in person or whether it's in my thoughts. You are truly my dearest and closest friend, and I love you.
You are the best ever. I love you. Have a great week. Everybody, every day should be better than the day before throughout your life. Thank you.
too.
Have a great week.